I, Ometond, was once the envy of all my friends in our small Yoruba village. I had been engaged to my fiancé, Adeyemi, for 4 years, and everyone thought that our union was destined for greatness. But as the years dragged on, I began to feel like I was stuck in limbo. Adeyemi and I had met in our early 20s, and our love had been strong and pure. We had talked about our future, our dreams, and our aspirations. We had planned to build a life together, to have children, and to grow old hand in hand. But as the years passed, Adeyemi began to drag his feet. At first, I had been patient. I had told myself that Adeyemi was just being cautious, that he wanted to make sure that he was ready for the responsibilities of marriage. But as the months turned into years, I began to feel like I was being strung along. I had tried to talk to Adeyemi about it, to ask him what was holding him back. But he had just shrugged it off, telling me that he was still thinking about it, that he needed more time. I had felt like I was losing my mind. That was when I decided to seek help. I had heard stories about a powerful Ifa priest, Babalawo, who lived on the outskirts of our village. People said that he had the power to solve any problem, to grant any wish. I had been skeptical at first, but desperation had driven me to seek him out. I made my way to Babalawo's shrine, my heart pounding with anticipation. I had no idea what to expect, but I was willing to try anything. As I entered the shrine, I saw Babalawo sitting on a stool, his eyes gleaming with an otherworldly intensity. "Welcome, my child," he said, his voice low and soothing. "I have been expecting you. You have come to seek my help, to ask for my guidance." I nodded, feeling a sense of wonder. How did he know? "I want to get married," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. "I've been engaged for 4 years, but my fiancé is dragging his feet. I want to know if there's anything I can do to make him commit." Babalawo nodded, his eyes glinting with interest. "I can help you," he said. "But you must be warned, my child. The solution I offer you will come with a price. Are you willing to pay it?" I hesitated, feeling a sense of trepidation. What did he mean? What price would I have to pay? But my desire to get married, to start a life with Adeyemi, overrode my doubts. I nodded, feeling a sense of determination. "Yes," I said. "I'm willing to pay the price." Babalawo smiled, his eyes glinting with amusement. "Very well," he said. "I will give you a charm that will persuade your fiancé to marry you. But remember, my child, the charm comes with a price. You must be prepared to pay it." I nodded, feeling a sense of excitement. I had no idea what the price would be, but I was willing to pay it. I just wanted to get married, to start a life with Adeyemi. Babalawo handed me a small pouch containing the charm. "This is a powerful juju," he said. "It will persuade your fiancé to marry you, but you must use it wisely." I took the pouch, feeling a sense of gratitude. "Thank you, Babalawo," I said. "I will use it wisely." Babalawo nodded, his eyes glinting with amusement. "I have no doubt that you will," he said. "But remember, my child, the charm comes with a price. You must be prepared to pay it." I nodded, feeling a sense of determination. I was willing to pay the price, no matter what it was. I just wanted to get married, to start a life with Adeyemi. I left Babalawo's shrine, feeling a sense of hope. I knew that the charm would work, that Adeyemi would finally agree to marry me. I was excited, eager to start our new life together. But little did I know, the charm would come with a terrible price, one that would change our lives forever. I see you're enjoying the story. Please subscribe if you want to continue seeing interesting stories like this. Have you subscribed? Okay, now back to the story. I walked back to my village, the pouch containing the charm clutched tightly in my hand. I couldn't wait to use it, to see the look on Adeyemi's face when he finally agreed to marry me. As I walked, I felt a sense of excitement building up inside me. I had been waiting for this moment for so long, and finally, it was within my grasp. I got to my house and went straight to my room. I locked the door behind me and sat down on my bed, the pouch still clutched in my hand. I opened the pouch and pulled out the charm. It was a small, intricately carved stone, surrounded by a piece of red cloth. Babalawo had told me to tie the cloth around my waist and to hold the stone in my hand when I saw Adeyemi. I tied the cloth around my waist and held the stone in my hand, feeling a strange sensation coursing through my body. It was as if the charm was alive, pulsing with a power that I couldn't quite understand. I waited until evening, when I knew Adeyemi would be coming to visit me. I sat down in the living room, the stone still clutched in my hand, and waited. When Adeyemi arrived, I felt a surge of excitement. I stood up and greeted him, trying to act normally despite the charm's strange power coursing through my body. Adeyemi looked at me strangely, as if he could sense that something was different. But he said nothing, just greeted me back and sat down. I sat down beside him, the stone still clutched in my hand. I looked into his eyes, trying to will him to agree to marry me. And then, something strange happened. Adeyemi's eyes seemed to glaze over, as if he was in a trance. He looked at me, but he didn't seem to see me. "I will marry you," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. "I will marry you tomorrow." I felt a surge of excitement and joy. It had worked. The charm had actually worked. But as I looked into Adeyemi's eyes, I saw something there that chilled me to the bone. It was a look of emptiness, of soullessness. It was as if he was no longer himself, but a puppet controlled by some unseen force. I felt a shiver run down my spine. What had I done? What had I unleashed? But it was too late now. The charm had been used, and its power had been unleashed. All I could do was wait and see what would happen next. I tried to push aside the feeling of unease that had settled in my stomach. I had gotten what I wanted, after all. Adeyemi had agreed to marry me. The next day, we went to see the village elder to make the necessary arrangements for the wedding. Adeyemi still seemed distant, as if he was in a trance. But I tried to ignore it, telling myself that he was just nervous about the wedding. The wedding ceremony was a blur. I remember walking down the aisle, seeing Adeyemi's face in front of me, and exchanging vows. But it all felt so surreal, as if I was watching it happen to someone else. After the ceremony, we went to the reception hall for the celebration. Adeyemi still seemed distant, but he went through the motions, smiling and laughing with our guests. I tried to enjoy myself, to celebrate our union. But the feeling of unease lingered, refusing to go away. As the night wore on, I began to notice strange looks from our guests. They would glance at Adeyemi, then back at me, their faces filled with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. I tried to ignore it, telling myself that they were just jealous of our happiness. But the looks persisted, and I began to feel like something was off. It wasn't until the end of the night, when we were dancing our first dance as husband and wife, that I saw something that made my blood run cold. Adeyemi's eyes had turned completely black, as if they had been swallowed up by some dark force. I stumbled backward, horrified, and that was when I saw Babalawo standing in the shadows, a sly smile spreading across his face. I knew then that something was terribly wrong. The charm had worked, but at what cost? I tried to push aside the feeling of horror that had settled in my stomach. I told myself that I must have imagined it, that Adeyemi's eyes couldn't have really turned black. But as I looked into his eyes again, I knew that I hadn't imagined it. There was something dark and sinister lurking behind his gaze, something that made my skin crawl. I tried to pretend that everything was normal, that the wedding had been a success. But as the days turned into weeks, I began to notice strange things about Adeyemi's behavior. He would disappear for hours at a time, only to return with no explanation of where he had been. He would talk to himself in a low, menacing tone, as if he was arguing with some unseen force. And then there were the nightmares. I would wake up in the middle of the night to find Adeyemi thrashing about, his eyes rolled back in his head. He would scream and shout, as if he was being tormented by some dark entity. I knew then that something was terribly wrong. The charm had unleashed a dark force into our lives, a force that threatened to destroy everything we held dear. I tried to talk to Adeyemi about it, to ask him what was happening. But he just shook his head, telling me that I was imagining things. "You're just stressed from the wedding," he said. "You need to relax." But I knew that I wasn't imagining things. I knew that something was terribly wrong. And then, one night, I saw it. I saw the dark force that had taken over Adeyemi's life. I was walking through the village when I saw Adeyemi standing in the shadows. He was talking to someone, but I couldn't see who it was. As I got closer, I saw that it was Babalawo. He was standing in front of Adeyemi, his eyes gleaming with an otherworldly intensity. "You must do as I say," Babalawo was saying. "You must obey my commands." Adeyemi nodded, his eyes glazed over. He looked like a puppet on strings, a mere shell of his former self. I knew then that I had made a terrible mistake. I had unleashed a dark force into our lives, a force that threatened to destroy everything we held dear. I turned and ran, not stopping until I was back in the safety of our hut. I locked the door behind me and collapsed onto the bed, my heart racing with fear. What had I done? What had I unleashed into our lives? I tried to avoid Adeyemi for the next few days, but it was impossible. We lived together, and I couldn't just ignore him. But every time I looked at him, I saw the darkness lurking behind his eyes. I saw the way he would nod and smile, as if he was being controlled by some unseen force. I knew then that I had to do something. I couldn't just sit back and watch as Adeyemi was consumed by the darkness. I decided to go back to Babalawo, to demand that he reverse the spell. But when I got to his shrine, I found him gone. I asked around, but no one seemed to know where he was. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. I was frantic. I didn't know what to do. I felt like I was losing Adeyemi, like he was slipping further and further away from me. And then, one night, I woke up to find Adeyemi standing over me. His eyes were black as coal, and his smile was twisted and evil. "You should not have come here," he said, his voice low and menacing. "You should not have tried to interfere." I tried to scream, but my voice was frozen in my throat. I tried to move, but my body was paralyzed with fear. Adeyemi reached out and touched my face, and I felt a surge of darkness flow through me. I knew then that I was doomed, that I would never be able to escape the evil that had consumed Adeyemi. And then, everything went black. When I woke up, I was alone in the hut. Adeyemi was gone, and I had no idea where he was. I stumbled out of the hut, into the bright sunlight. I looked around, but everything seemed different. The village seemed darker, more sinister. I knew then that I had to get out of there, to escape the evil that had consumed Adeyemi. But as I turned to run, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Adeyemi. His eyes were still black as coal, and his smile was still twisted and evil. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his voice low and menacing. "You're mine now." I tried to shake off Adeyemi's grip, but he held me tight. I looked around, hoping to find someone to help me, but the village was eerily quiet. As I struggled to free myself, I saw some of the villagers watching us from afar. They looked at me with a mixture of suspicion and fear. "What's going on?" one of them asked, a tall, lanky man named Tond. Adeyemi just smiled, his eyes glinting with an otherworldly intensity. "Nothing," he said. "Just a little disagreement between my wife and me." But the villagers didn't look convinced. They looked at me with a mixture of pity and suspicion. "We've noticed some strange things about you, Adeyemi," Tan said. "You've been acting strangely, and some of us have seen you talking to things in the dead of night." Adeyemi's smile faltered for a moment, but then he regained his composure. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. But the villagers just looked at each other, their faces filled with suspicion and fear. "We are watching you, Adeyemi," Tan said. "And if we find out that you're involved in anything unnatural, there will be consequences." Adeyemi's face darkened, and for a moment, I thought I saw something evil lurking behind his eyes. But then, his face smoothed out, and he smiled again. "I'm not afraid of you," he said. "I'm not afraid of anyone." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, feeling scared and alone. The villagers looked at me with a mixture of pity and suspicion, and I knew that I had to do something. I had to find a way to break the curse that had consumed Adeyemi before it was too late. I knew I had to act fast. I couldn't just sit back and watch as Adeyemi continued to change before my eyes. I had to find a way to break the curse, to free him from the grip of the dark force that had consumed him. I spent the next few days searching for answers. I talked to the villagers, asking if they knew anything about the curse or how to break it. But no one seemed to know anything. I even went back to Babalawo's shrine, hoping to find some clues. But the shrine was empty, and there was no sign of the old man. I was starting to lose hope. I felt like I was running out of options, and I didn't know what else to do. But then, one day, I received a visit from an old woman who lived on the outskirts of the village. She was a respected healer and spiritual leader, and I had heard that she had knowledge of the dark arts. "Ometand, I've come to help you," she said, her eyes filled with compassion. "I know what's happening to Adeyemi. I know about the curse." I felt a surge of hope. Finally, someone who could help me. "What do I need to do?" I asked, my voice shaking with desperation. The old woman smiled. "I'll give you a potion," she said. "It's a powerful antidote to the curse. But you must be warned, Ometand. The potion comes with a great cost. Are you prepared to pay it?" I hesitated for a moment. What could the cost possibly be? But then I thought about Adeyemi, about how much I loved him and how much I wanted to save him. "Yes," I said, my voice firm. "I'm prepared to pay it." The old woman nodded. "Very well," she said. "I'll give you the potion. But remember, Ometand, you have been warned." I took the potion from the old woman and held it in my hands, feeling its weight and power. It was a small vial of dark liquid, and it seemed to pulsate with an otherworldly energy. "What do I need to do?" I asked the old woman. "You must give the potion to Adeyemi," she replied. "But you must be careful. The potion's power is strong, and it may have unintended consequences." I nodded, feeling a sense of determination. I was willing to risk anything to save Adeyemi. I made my way back to our hut, the potion clutched in my hand. I found Adeyemi sitting in the corner, his eyes black as coal. I approached him slowly, the potion held out in front of me. "Adeyemi," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. "I have something that can help you. Something that can break the curse." Adeyemi looked up at me, his eyes empty and soulless. But then, something flickered in his gaze. A spark of recognition, of humanity. I poured the potion into a cup and held it out to him. "Drink this," I said. "It will help you." Adeyemi hesitated for a moment, and then he reached out and took the cup. He drank the potion in one swift motion, and then he looked up at me. For a moment, I saw the old Adeyemi, the man I had fallen in love with. His eyes were bright and warm, and his smile was genuine. But then, something happened. Adeyemi's body began to convulse, his limbs twisting and contorting in ways that seemed impossible. His eyes rolled back in his head, and he let out a loud, anguished cry. I was horrified. What had I done? I had thought that the potion would help Adeyemi, but now it seemed that it had made things worse. I tried to rush to Adeyemi's side, but the old woman grabbed my arm, holding me back. Wait, she said. The potion is working. It's just taking a different form than we expected. I looked at her in confusion, but she just nodded. Trust me, she said. The potion will work. But we must be patient. I nodded, feeling a sense of uncertainty. Had I made a mistake? Had I just made things worse? But as I looked at Adeyemi, I saw something that gave me hope. His body was still convulsing, but his eyes were starting to clear. He was starting to come back to me. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. Adeyemi's body went limp, and he collapsed to the ground. I rushed to his side, feeling a sense of panic. But as I looked into his eyes, I saw something that made my heart leap with joy. Adeyemi was back. The curse was broken, and he was himself again. But as I looked closer, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Adeyemi's eyes were no longer black, but they were no longer warm and bright either. They were cold, calculating, and completely devoid of emotion. What had I done? I stared into Adeyemi's eyes, trying to understand what I was seeing. They were cold, calculating, and completely devoid of emotion. It was as if he was a different person, a person I didn't know. What's going on? I asked, my voice shaking with fear. What's happened to you? Adeyemi looked at me, his eyes unblinking. I'm fine, he said, his voice flat and emotionless. I'm just different now. I felt a chill run down my spine. What did he mean? What had the potion done to him? I tried to ask him more questions, but he just shook his head. I don't know, he said. I just know that I'm different now. I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I had thought that the potion would cure Adeyemi, but now I wasn't so sure. As the days passed, Adeyemi's behavior became more and more erratic. He would lash out at me for no reason, and then apologize with a cold, calculating smile. I was walking on eggshells around him, never knowing what would set him off. And I couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something from me. One night, I woke up to find Adeyemi standing over me, his eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. What are you doing? I asked, my voice shaking with fear. Adeyemi just smiled, his eyes glinting with malevolence. I'm just watching you, he said. I felt a chill run down my spine. What was happening to Adeyemi? What had the potion done to him? And then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. Adeyemi's eyes returned to normal, and he looked at me with a confused expression. What's going on? He asked, his voice shaking with fear. I just shook my head. I don't know, I said. But I think we need to get out of here. We need to get away from this village. Adeyemi nodded, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. We packed our bags and left the village that night, not knowing what lay ahead, but knowing that we had to get away from the evil that had consumed Adeyemi. We left the village and started a new life in the city. But the nightmare was far from over. Adeyemi's behavior continued to become more and more erratic. He would have mood swings, and sometimes he would just disappear for hours without telling me where he was going. I was at my wit's end. I didn't know what to do. I felt like I was losing my mind. One day, I received a visit from the old woman who had given me the potion. She looked at me with a mixture of sadness and regret. I'm so sorry, Ometond, she said. I didn't mean for things to turn out this way. The potion was meant to break the curse, but it seems to have had an unexpected side effect. I looked at her in anger. What do you mean? I demanded. What have you done to him? The old woman sighed. The potion was too powerful, she said. It not only broke the curse, but it also unleashed a dark energy that has consumed Adeyemi. I'm afraid he may never be the same again. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. What can I do? I asked, my voice shaking with desperation. The old woman looked at me with a mixture of sadness and pity. I'm afraid there's nothing you can do, she said. The damage is done. All you can do is try to make the best of a bad situation. I felt like my world was crashing down around me. I had thought that I had saved Adeyemi, but now I realized that I had only made things worse. As the days turned into weeks, Adeyemi's behavior continued to deteriorate. He became more and more violent, and I started to fear for my safety. I knew that I had to get out, but I didn't know where to go or what to do. I felt trapped and helpless. And then, one day, I received a visit from a mysterious stranger. He was tall and dark, with piercing eyes that seemed to see right through me. Can I help you? I asked, trying to hide my fear. The stranger smiled. I'm here to help you, Ometond, he said. I'm here to help you escape the nightmare that you're living in. I looked at him in confusion. Who are you? I asked. The stranger smiled again. My name is not important, he said. What's important is that I can help you. Are you ready to escape? I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. But then I looked at Adeyemi, who was sitting in the corner, his eyes vacant and unresponsive. I knew that I had to get out, for my own sake and for his. Yes, I said, making up my mind. I'm ready to escape. The stranger nodded. Follow me, he said. I followed him out of the house and into the night. We walked for what felt like hours, until we reached a small cottage on the outskirts of the village. The stranger opened the door and gestured for me to enter. I did, and found myself in a cozy room filled with strange and exotic objects. The stranger smiled. You are safe now, he said. You are free from the curse that has consumed Adeyemi. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I was finally free. But as I looked around the room, I realized that I was not alone. There were others there, others who had also been affected by the curse. The stranger smiled. You are not alone, he said. There are others who have been through what you have been through. And together, you can heal and move on. I felt a sense of hope that I had not felt in a long time. I knew that I still had a long way to go, but I also knew that I was not alone. And as I looked at the stranger, I realized that he was not just a mysterious figure who had helped me escape. He was a symbol of hope and redemption. Moral of the story. The story of Ometond and Adeyemi teaches us the importance of being careful what we wish for. Ometond's desire to save Adeyemi led her to make a deal with a powerful and malevolent force, which ultimately led to devastating consequences. It also teaches us the importance of seeking help and guidance from those who are wiser and more experienced than us. Ometond's decision to seek help from the old woman and the stranger ultimately led to her escape and redemption. Finally, it teaches us the importance of hope and redemption. No matter how dark and difficult our circumstances may seem, there is always hope for a better future. And with the right guidance and support, we can overcome even the most daunting challenges. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the story. Please like, share and subscribe to the channel if you want to continue seeing interesting stories like this. To watch more videos like this one, click the right side of your screen to watch any of these two interesting videos. See you in the next video.